Hey guys, Dr. Berg here. Listen, I want to talk about what are the symptoms of high cortisol versus low cortisol. Okay, cortisol is a stress hormone. It's there to react and adapt your body to action states, flight or fight, or stress. Okay, so let's just take a look at high cortisol. You have fatigue, inflammation, blood sugar problems, sugar cravings, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and belly fat. The symptoms of low cortisol are chronic fatigue, chronic inflammation, blood sugar problems, sugar cravings, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and belly fat. If you notice, they're identical. Now, the only real difference would be with low cortisol, you have more chronic burnout, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic inflammatory issues like fibromyalgia, which you're hurting all over. This is more shorter term. Okay, so now there is a condition where you have low cortisol, but that's more of a disease condition where you have, it's called Addison's. And in Addison's, that's more autoimmune, where your body's attacking itself, where you have very low immunity because the cortisol hormone controls your white blood cells. You have weight loss, so you're very, very thin. Okay, now with this situation, you have high cortisol, you've got belly fat, and if you go to low, you don't just get thin. What caused the low is the high cortisol that then burns this out over time. This condition is completely a different thing. It's usually triggered by stress, but it's mainly like you're thin. Vertigo. Michael Jackson had it where you have the loss of pigment and these little white specks on your skin. It's from stress. Autoimmune issues. Because the immune system is involved, also darker pigment on the skin, so your skin becomes a little bit darker. So basically, I'm not talking about that situation. I'm talking about where you are high and then you end up low. And the reason is, it's very similar to what happens with insulin. You get insulin resistance. You can have cortisol resistance. So look at this. You have high cortisol jamming into the receptors, okay? If you have too much of this hormone that's going into receptors over a period of time, your body adapts to it because too much cortisol is unhealthy and it starts to resist or downgrade the receptor, okay? So now we have cortisol resistance or cortisol receptor resistance, or the name of this, if you really want to know, if you want to do some research, I'll put some links down below. It's called glucocorticoid receptor resistance, okay? Not that you need to know that, but anyway, that's what it's called. There's not a lot of research on it. There's some, but I believe it's more common than it's being promoted. But you have cortisol resistance, and then what happens, inside the cell, you have this cell that's starving of cortisol. So you're going to get inflammation, you're going to have all sorts of issues because you need a certain amount of cortisol. You don't need too much. So you lose the benefit of cortisol, which is immune control, anti-inflammatory, regulation of blood sugar, all these other things, and things get out of control. So the signal comes right back here to the adrenal, the signal of low cortisol, because it's on a feedback loop. It's kind of like talking to your child and he or she's ignoring you, and so you're going to, with earplugs, you're going to shout, so the adrenal is going to make more communication, more hormone to get it connected. So with cortisol resistance, you have a situation where you have high cortisol symptoms and low cortisol symptoms. That's what I think is going on, because it's very, very difficult to distinguish one from the other. So now what happens when you're in a state of flight or fight or stress over a period of time, you go from here to here, or you start going high cortisol and then you go low. And that's really what happens. What triggers this is chronic stress. Our bodies have not developed or adapted enough to handle the amount of mental stress that is put on us. Incredible mental stress. So maybe another 100 million years will adapt, but the point is that chronic stress is it's not short-lived, it's long-term. That's really what does it. So you have to break things up, go for long walks. You have to not sit in front of the computer 12 hours a day. You have to change your environment, get into nature a lot more, take care of your body, take less stimulants, less caffeine, things like that. Now, if you wanted to support the low cortisol, this is what I have for that. It's called Adrenal Fatigue Advanced Formula. This is mainly for the chronic inflammatory condition. Let's say you have autoimmune, you want to support it, maybe some skin issues, allergies, asthma, but you're really tired, no patience, no tolerance for stress. That's this over here. This one is called cortisol, adrenal cortisol relief, is more for high cortisol. This is the more common one that I would recommend because maybe you haven't developed a chronic inflammatory condition yet, you're not chronically fatigued, you have energy sometimes, then you would need some of this to support that, okay? So I just wanted to kind of differentiate either or, just to give you a picture because it is confusing and people don't know, do they have low cortisol or high cortisol? All right, put your comments below, tell me what you think. Hey, you probably already subscribed, but if you haven't, press this little button down below and I will keep you updated.